and willingness to pay for biodiversity without showing one species that I love so much that I'm actually myself willing to pay for. It lives just outside the tent on the fields, and you could hear it like this time of the year, the storspov, the curlew. I live 40 kilometers from here in the area where this species also breeds, and I have considered how much am I actually willing to pay to keep it. Because since I was a little boy during the 1970s, more than half of the Swedish population is lost. And where I was born, in the southern Sweden, it's not there anymore. When I keep speeches about biodiversity for boards and management groups in large companies in southern Sweden, they are not familiar to this bird anymore. I will come back to these species, but I hope I will give you some more perspectives, because we have had some really good insights from the former speakers. My main messages will be about biodiversity needs a business solution. Some of the speakers have really addressed that question already. And I mean that there is a growing societal and business demand. We have also addressed that question. But what is maybe new for you is that I will also address the challenge of measurability. And I will give you an example from what I am part of developing. So who am I? I am Anders Enetjärn, and I'm the founder of Ecogain. It's if we start here at 4 o'clock, going clockwise around, I run a business in ecology, strategy and data with about 50, 60 staff all around Sweden. We work with land and water use. We are ecologists. We make money out of the issue of biodiversity, but not selling credits. Natural capital is total focus for all our client solutions. On the top, there are some of our initiatives which also make me stand here today. We run a business network which is called the Business and Biodiversity Sweden, with about 30 large Swedish companies as members. Some of them are here today. We have produced the first industry roadmap on biodiversity for the Swedish mining industry that address the issue of setting no net loss targets in the regions where they operate. We are developing a metric, climb, for biodiversity, which I will present. And a thing that I will not talk so much about is the Ecogain Biodiversity Index, but I heard from the bank they've heard about it. It's an index where we review the reporting from large businesses all over Europe on their way of reporting on biodiversity. So we set a figure on each of 400 European companies on their reporting. The last one was released in May this year. Talking about the curlew, you could see the loss of biodiversity. This is an example from UK, where 60% of the UK priority species since 1970 has had a decline. And I take this picture because this has happened despite a strong effort from the government, and also 17 very wealthy NGOs and funds with so much money, but still you have this decline. So what is lost? What is missing? When we talk about the energy, the CO2, carbon dioxide issue, there is a lot of money to make for companies saving energy. So you can see these icons, save energy, you will earn money on that. You can see the icons on saving water, you will earn money on that as a business. But are there any incentives for companies to save land, to save biodiversity? Today the answer is no. That's why I didn't find that icon. My wife did it last night. Because there's no such icon to save land. And this, a very near example is from my hometown, Umeå, where, as in any town, large businesses develop land. They take a big piece of cake from the land, 40 hectares, with fantastic natural environment, biodiversity. They pay for everything but the loss of biodiversity. That's for free. That's how it works today. So that's why we need to address the market failure. And so far, the NGOs and the governments have not succeeded on that. So you could look at this picture down here and figure out where is the place for the curlew. The reason why the curlew has decreased so much in Sweden is that the landscape, the agricultural landscape, has transformed from right to left. There are no hiding places. One of these days, exactly now, the harvesting will start, and the small chicks, I know they have chicks now, they are about this size, they have a great risk of ending up in the ensilage harvesting. That's one of the risks for them, and they can't hide, which they did in the 60s and the 70s. One very important issue to address when we talk about biodiversity and land use is that we waste so much land. I don't know if you are familiar with that. Household waste in Sweden is 635,000 tons per year. 28% of the household's solid waste is estimated to be waste. Anyway, this figure tells that about a large part of the agricultural landscape is used for producing trash. But we can't afford biodiversity. To me, this is a market failure, but also a huge opportunity to change the system. There's so much space for biodiversity if we can change the way we produce things. We consume too much and we throw away too much. And if you listen to Eva Karlsson, who is the CEO of Houdini, a famous Swedish outdoor clothing brand, she says that 100 billion garments are manufactured every year globally. 60% of them end up in the trash bin before the end of the year, which is insane. But it also says that a huge part of the world is used for very, very short consumption. I don't have these figures on the forest landscape. I suppose there is a lot of short-term production in the forest landscape as well. So the potential is enormous. So how does this come back to the businesses? My conclusion is that there is a need for market mechanisms to value natural resources besides value for consumption today and even trash. We have heard so many speakers saying that before. And besides business, I would say, no actor, provenly, can provide solutions for biodiversity at scale. It's just about changing the market mechanism to put these incentives at scale and start producing biodiversity. Coming to the other question that I will address is that there is a growing societal and business demand. We have heard that. And when I talk about this and ask boards and management teams, why do you come to me asking about biodiversity? When did you hear that first time? They don't know. But it is the report from IPBES, the governmental platform, the intergovernmental platform from the UN on biodiversity and ecosystem services that released its global assessment report 3 years ago. That was a milestone. People don't understand that was a milestone, but someone who translated this to the business community was the World Economic Forum that have said the last 3 years that biodiversity loss is one of our absolute major risks to society, to people and planet. And this has then come into legislation, started getting into legislation, and the EU taxonomy is one of them. And the fine thing with the EU taxonomy, even if it's so debated, it's so much conflicts around it, the taxonomy says that you need to address 6 planetary goals. One of them is biodiversity, health ecosystems. And you need to have good sustainable finance, do no significant harm to none of them, to any of them, but substantially contribute to one of them. This kind of systems, this kind of legislation system sets a momentum for demand on biodiversity solutions besides other planetary solutions. I would just say some other things that come from the business community, and one example is from the Norwegian Oil Fund that last year came out with an expectation document to all their 11,000 investment companies, saying that you need to start addressing biodiversity by now. We will follow up on that. BlackRock did the same. And another one that I believe has is going to be a very strong driver is the follow-up on TCFD, the TNFD, the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. In my intelligence, talking to people in other countries, I hear that this is going to be a driver. It's going to be a driver for biodiversity in investments. Till this spring, I thought that in Sweden, the strong driver would be a national legislation on biodiversity offsetting. I don't believe that anymore. I think that financial regulations like TNFD is going to be the strong driver, and that will be global driver. I told you about the mining with nature. There are 23 fossil-free roadmaps for different industries in Sweden. All kinds of industries have produced their fossil-free roadmaps. The first one on biodiversity is mining with nature. And it's interesting to follow the most dirty industries because they are ahead. So they start addressing the biodiversity issue before other industries do that. And they set a standard by saying that we will reach no net loss in the regions where we operate. I work right now for a mining company that have set a target that their loss will be balanced with 15% plus. 15% biodiversity net gain, and that's voluntary for them. And of course, that will spill over to their financing. Finally, our own initiative from Ecogain, I wouldn't put it there unless so many companies called us this year and asked about how did you figure out that figure on us, that grade on us, and how will you set up the standards next year? We want to know in advance because of our reporting. They want to know how we will set up the scheme next year. So this is driving also driving a demand for biodiversity investments. Ecogain has worked since 17 years on biodiversity offsetting in mitigation banking, not banking, but project-wise offsetting. The first one was the large offsetting scheme in Umeälvens Delta. Some of you are familiar to that. I went by train here last night and there was so many birds in this fantastic wetland. This is a typical habitat with a short time of delivery. 10 years after the investment, it's producing a lot of biodiversity credits. I also see from me and my colleagues' perspective, the municipalities are scaling up. They want to build their communities, their cities with a no net loss, a no net loss standard for planning. So every kind of planning will be connected to calculating the loss and figure out possible gains on other sites. This is from Uppsala. I saw some people recognize the map. So my conclusion here is that there is a growing demand for biodiversity investments and nature-based solutions producing biodiversity. It's from developer, from finance, from the other corporate sector, but also from the public sector in Sweden. Finally, I will address the last question pretty quickly, but it's about measuring biodiversity. When Ecogain worked with all these offsetting projects, we had to find methods to set a standard for calculating biodiversity, and we had so many saying it can't be measured. It's too difficult. It's too complicated. But I would say that without a simple KPI for biodiversity, no scalable business solutions. You wouldn't get a CEO or a head of the board talking about biodiversity if she or he does not have a simple KPI. As for gender equality and other sustainability issues. So we started Climb, and Climb is a metric for biodiversity that is supposed to be a metric for changing land use impact on biodiversity, a developed and well-established method for valuing biodiversity in land use change. It will help companies to credibly quantify and communicate direct impact on biodiversity, to talk about biodiversity, to make informed decisions in the board and in the management room. And I will very short, and we developed Climb since a year ago. We'll finish this at the end of this year, and we do that from our Business Biodiversity Network. There were 10 companies in the network saying that we want to be part of that. So they are partners developing Climb together with Ecogain, and we have some public funding for it as well. And as you see, there are different industries, but mostly developers. And as I have, I will show you some pictures quickly, but this is in Swedish, unfortunately. I couldn't make it into English, the slides I got from my friend. But Climb is divided into the impact area. You measure the impact. You measure the baseline. You measure the impact, and you have the same methodology for measuring the compensation area. So it's about a mitigation, a development area. And so far, we have had a system in Sweden of surveying nature in different grades. 7 is the worst biodiversity. Grade 1 is the highest biodiversity. But this map doesn't inform a board on a good decision about where to develop a plan for mining, a plan for wind power, a power line, or whatever. You need to translate that into a unit that can be calculatable. And this unit depends on the natural value, the area, and we have something that is called the strategic weight. The climb calculation is a sophisticated metric in an equation developed by some of my PhD ecologists, together in line with stakeholders from 30 different organizations, NGOs and authorities. So the baseline could be in an area that you have, before the development, 131 biodiversity points, biodiversity units. But then there's someone who wants to develop the area, and you lose a lot of units. That one would also address an area that keeping it and restoring, you make it even better. So getting some gains in that area. But finally, you will have a loss in the area, which will be going from 131 to 99 points, which means that a loss of 32 biodiversity units. Besides that, you need to find a compensation area, and that is what could be solved through a market system in the best way. Today, so far, the Swedish developers have used it project-wise. They have to search for their compensation area by themselves, and using the same calculation, you get a baseline according to the Swedish standard for surveying. You get a biodiversity point, get biodiversity unit, but you can also get into there and say that we're going to restore habitats. We're going to do actual nature-based solutions in promoting biodiversity in forestry, in streams, in different kinds of grassland habitats, all kinds of nature types, and that restoring gives you the total amount, and in that total amount you calculate on difficulty, you calculate on times of delivery. So it's a complicated, sophisticated equation taking into account a lot of different aspects that are important to understand biodiversity in the future, and also the distance, because this is not going to be a global market. There is a distance parameter as well. And finally, you would end up with an possible additionality, if you contribute to that biodiversity plan with 69 points in this scheme, and which means that you would have a loss of 32 but a plus of 69, which means that you end up total plus 37 in this case. So this will be, you double the loss with the double amount of gains. I don't get into the details, but you understand that it is a model under development, and the aim is to release this open source in the end of the year. So finally, my conclusion is business has the capability, the potential of solving the biodiversity issue at scale. And there is a demand now, which means there is a momentum, and that's why we're here. But also I want to address, and I always address, that you need to accept simple KPIs for biodiversity, unless you wouldn't have a board talking about it. Someone from the industry associations that I used to talk to, they say, don't talk to them about dead wood, don't talk to them about bugs, they will just throw you out. But if they have a figure, 32 points versus 23, you can actually have a discussion on investments in biodiversity. So thank you so much for this. I'm happy for some questions.